Welcome to Ceramic Pottery and Sculpture Tutorials. Today we're going to learn how to make a wall pocket like this, and as we do we're going to be talking a little bit about texture, different ways you can apply texture to the clay, talk about proportion a little bit, and also attention to detail. So we're going to start with making some slabs. Well, there's a variety of different ways to make slabs. Today we're going to cut them. And I'm going to do that by putting this block of clay on the table, and then I have these two boards that I'm going to lay on their side. And if I take a wire and hold it tight and down against the two boards for the entire pass, then I get a slab cut that's the thickness of the boards. So I'm going to do that again. Cut myself a second slab. You want to make sure that wire is held down tight against the two boards for the entire pass. And leftover clay, you want to get that wrapped up right back into the plastic so it doesn't dry out. Now, cutting slabs makes a nice even thick slab, but this slab is weak. If I was just to let it dry and fire like this, there's a good chance that I'd get a crack right across the middle. So I want to give this slab some strength, and the way to do that is to apply pressure to the slab, and I'll do that with a rolling pin. Now, there are platelets in the clay, and what I'm doing by applying pressure to the clay is I'm lining up those platelets, and by making the clay stronger it's less likely to warp or crack. As I do that, I'm also going to apply some texture. Now, there's all different kinds of things that you can use to apply texture to clay. There are texture pads that you can buy. Here's one that looks like wood. Here's another one that looks like stone. You can also buy texture wheels. Here's one you can roll across clay to make flowers. And then they have small wooden ones you can just roll across the clay to get some other different textures. For this piece, I'm going to use a doily, and I'm going to set that doily on the slab where I want it before I apply the pressure. Then I'll use my rolling pin and just press really hard. So I'm compressing the clay, but I'm also rolling that doily right into the clay. And that gives me my texture. Now, I'm going to add a pocket to this piece. And so I'm using another half a slab of clay here. And I'm not going to add texture to this half because I don't want the pocket portion to compete with the back. So I won't add any more texture, but I am going to roll it out to give it some strength. And then I want to cut one straight edge across the top. And that's going to go over here. And I'm going to use a half a page of newspaper to support the pocket while it's drying. Now, this edge of the pocket here is pretty sharp, so I'm going to pinch that out a little bit and smooth it out. And the clay that I'm using right now is pretty soft. So by just pressing the clay into the back, I'm going to be able to stick this pocket to the back. And I'm going to cut off the excess. Now, I want this pocket to fold around, so I'm going to hold it off the end of the table and curl it under and around the bottom. And right now this clay is like frosting. So I can just smooth it out like this, like butter. If I have a little hole somewhere, I can just fill in that hole. And now the pocket portion is finished. What I want to do next is cut around the outside. So I could kind of trace some lines and think about how I want to cut that shape before I commit. And then once I'm ready, I can commit to that cut. And it's kind of nice if the pocket does not divide the back in half, but splits up the back about 2/3 to 1/3. So 1/3 pocket to 2/3 back. I could peel this out a little bit like that. Now, this back area looks relatively unfinished. So I'm going to add a coil to this back area. So I'm going to take some clay in my hand and get the coil started. Once I've got the coil started in my hand, I can just go back and forth on the table. If the coil starts to flop around on you like this, just set it up on end, tap it down, and then keep rolling. I'll take away half of that, roll out some more. And I'm going to roll this down to about the thickness, maybe between a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch. And I'm going to add this to the back. But when I do that, I don't want to add it here because you see the seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on top. And then again, because I'm dealing with clay that's soft plastic and the coil is soft plastic, all I have to do is press hard and I can get it to stick. And I'll take off the excess here. And now what that's done is it's almost made it look like a basket with a handle, and it's really done a nice job of finishing the back. Now I'm going to do one more thing, and that is I want to add a little attention to detail to these two sides of the wall pocket here. So whatever I put here, I'm going to put the same thing over here. And whenever you're doing that, you want to measure out your clay first. So whenever you're making something like an animal that has 2 ears, 2 eyes, or a person with 4 feet, 2 feet, you want to measure out the clay first. So whatever I make with this piece of clay, when I go to make something with this piece, it'll be about the same. I'm going to cut this in half. Place one of them on one side, one on the other. Press them into place. And I'm going to take smaller pieces here. And I'm going to add that to each side. And then I'm going to take a ballpoint pen and I'm going to make 4 little dots on the inside. And what that does is it makes it look like a button. So when we talk about attention to detail, we're talking about adding something to your piece that people won't necessarily see right off the bat. The people that look carefully at your work will have some little surprise to find. So be thinking about how you can apply attention to detail with everything that you make. The last thing I want to do is put a hole in the piece so that it can hang from the wall. And I don't want the hole too close to the top here because that doesn't give it much clay to support the weight of the piece. So typically I go down about 1 inch from the top, use my fettling knife kind of like a drill, make a hole a little bigger than you think you want because when you go to glaze the piece, some of the glaze will fill in a little bit. And then in the back, I'm going to clean that back side of that hole. Now, if you are working on making something that has a progression in size, like a rose, and you want to do petals that gradually get bigger or smaller, the best way to do that is to take a piece of clay, cut it in half, take half of that, cut it in half, and half of that, cut it in half. And what I'm doing is I'm making a progression in size of pieces of clay. And I can start with the large one, and then the next smaller. I could do a flower with petals, or I could do just a little paisley design here. And you can see how this piece could be a design on the side of a piece of some kind. Now, I do want to show you one more strategy for making a wall pocket that's a little bit simpler. I'm just going to take some scrap clay, and I'm just going to push it out a little bit. So, you know, maybe you don't have a huge block of clay, but you got a little scrap clay here. And I want this a little bit wider, so I'm going to use the rolling pin to roll it out a little bit wider. And then I'm going to use these same boards, and I'm going to set the clay down and start in the middle and just push, rolling the clay out. And you want to pick it up every once in a while so it doesn't stick to the table. If you do have issues with it sticking to the table, you can always work on cloth or newspaper. Now, I'm just going to make a wall pocket where I fold up the bottom piece. And I do want to roll this out a little bit thinner, so I have some different size boards here. You want to work from thick to thin. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this up, and that's going to be my pocket. So rather than have the pocket go this direction, I want it to go this way. So I'm going to cut that. And again, this cut edge is very sharp, so I want to spend a little bit of time rounding that up and smoothing it out. And I'm going to add some texture to the back of this piece. So I just went outside and got a little piece of a tree. And then I'm going to take a modeling tool and just make some other marks here in the back. I'm just poking this modeling tool into the clay. Now, again, when I flip this up, I can just press this clay together. And again, you want to push pretty hard. These are typically weak points, so I do want to add a little detail to both of those. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other one, where I measure out the clay first. if you do something that you feel is successful, consider applying it to other pieces. So last time I added a couple little buttons. I'm going to do the same kind of thing on this piece. And I'm able to just press this clay together because, again, all of this clay is in the plastic state. Now I'm going to take the back side of my fettling knife that's a little blunt, and I'm just going to make a mark in this, and a mark in this side, and now I'm giving it an illusion of a screw head. And you end up with a wall pocket like this. And again, don't forget to put some type of hole in the top so you can hang it. And you may decide that you don't mind the piece having a rough edge. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle. This is a good example of one that doesn't have a perfect semicircle to the back. And you don't have to add the coil. Now the piece of tree that I've put in here, if you put leaves or tree or anything like that that is organic and is just going to burn up, the best thing to do is just leave it there during the drying and firing process. It'll burn out and you'll get a nice finished texture. Alright, so I encourage you to go online and do some research of your own to find out other ways that you can make ceramic wall hangings and ceramic wall pockets. Alright, thank you for watching.